Most of us have two lives, the life we live and the unlived life within us. Between the two stands resistance. If you struggle with self-doubt, procrastination, self-sabotage, or basically any thought patterns that hold you back from living the life that you want to live, then stick around because we're going to discuss one of the reasons you may be settling in your life, resistance. But before we get into that, Adam's going to give the formal introduction to the show.
Welcome to Settling's Not an Option. I'm Adam Nebbs and I'm here with my co-host Amanda Stanhope. This show is for anyone out there who feels like they've settled for an unfulfilling life. Whether you've settled in a relationship, the work that you do, or how you feel about yourself, we're here to tell you that settling's not an option. If you're liking the show, please follow us on Spotify, Amazon Music, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have any feedback about the show or want to recommend a topic, you can also email us at cheers2notsettling@gmail.com. Finally, if you feel so inclined, you can donate to us on Coffee, where we're aiming to buy some new audio equipment. Probably need to get rid of that end bit because we've technically got audio equipment, but I just haven't set it up yet. So.
I haven't either. I almost tested mine today. I'm like, I've had it in the box for like a month. I'm like, I need to test this out.
Yeah, mine's not moved out of the box. Well, okay, maybe for the next episode.
That's our goal for next time.
I think so. So if anyone, just wait for the next one. Like, get through this episode with us, watch the next one. That's when you get to see the cool audio equipment.
Yes, that's a promise.
That no one actually gave us any money for, just saying. So
right.
Just a guilt trip. Sorry, I'm derailing the show. Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. We need to get some people into giving us some money.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So today's episode is basically revolves around the work of Steven Pressfield, and we'll get into that more. But the ultimate question that we're going to attempt to answer in this episode is, when we're struggling in life, how do we know if we need to rest, change course, or face resistance head on? And we're also going to discuss some other quotes from Steven Pressfield at the end of the show, just for fun. So, all right, but first we need to talk about what resistance is. Because I've already said the word a couple times, and you're probably sitting there thinking, what the heck is this resistance thing that she's talking about? So resistance is an idea that was put forth by Steven Pressfield in his book, The War of Art. And he writes that most of us have two lives, the life we live and the unlived life within us. Between the two stands resistance. So resistance is basically going back to what I talked about in the introduction, your self-doubt, your procrastination, your self-sabotage. Those are some examples of resistance. And he describes resistance as the most toxic force on the planet. It is the root of more unhappiness than poverty, disease, and erectile dysfunction. I had to put that in there because I just love, he puts in his writing, he always has these little funny things in there. But the reason that resistance is the most toxic force is because he says, Steven Pressfield says, to yield to resistance deforms our spirit. It stunts us and makes us less than we are and we're born to be. So basically it's standing between you and what you want to achieve in life, and basically it's what's causing you to settle for an unfulfilling life. And to give you an idea of some of the activities, so he noted these activities elicit resistance, and these are just some. He actually listed a ton of different activities, but he says any act that rejects immediate gratification in favor of long-term growth, health, or integrity will elicit resistance, or any act that derives from our higher nature instead of our lower nature. And some examples are the pursuit of the arts, starting a business, starting any diet or exercise plan, spiritual advancement, overcoming bad habits or addiction, education of every kind, or starting a family. So those are some examples. Hopefully that paints kind of a picture of what resistance is. Do you have anything to add to that before I...
I heard him say that, for every dream that you have, resistance radiates off that dream, because he loves to use a lot of analogies. Like he said, the dream would be the tree and resistance is the shadow. It's the shadow that comes off everything.
Okay, the shadow off of the tree.
Off of the tree, yeah, which is your dream. But yeah, it's interesting because I think it's so true. Resistance is really... It's always there, but you just don't really think about it. Right. It's interesting.
Yeah, and he goes into more detail in The War of Art. He goes into more detail about how it, and maybe we were going to talk about this later because you were going to talk about how it kind of manifests itself, but how it can lead to so many horrible things. And he even says, now this might be a stretch, but Adolf Hitler was a painter, or he had taken on some painting. He wanted to be a painter, but he said, you never see one of his paintings because he didn't pursue that. And because he didn't pursue that, or he actually felt somehow caught whatever what am I trying to say? Starting the whole Nazi revolution or whatever you call it. That's not the right term, but somehow easier to him than sitting down. And it's like, so I mean, that's an extreme example, and who knows even what it was, but he used that as an extreme example of how it can really show up in horrible ways in people's lives.
Yeah, wow, what a powerful analogy.
Yeah, I know.
Like, if only Hitler had taken up painting.
Yeah, like it was easier to start World War II than to sit down and paint. And it's like, well, I'm sure there's some truth to that. As crazy as it sounds. Yeah. But so I thought too, we could maybe give some examples of resistance in our own lives. Before the show, we were kind of talking about this, but the biggest resistance I face is every morning when I get up, because I am the type of person who never wants to get out of bed for some reason, or very rarely. I shouldn't say never, but it's pretty darn rare that I actually want to get up out of bed. And even if I've had a full night's sleep, even if, it's still, when it's time to get up, I just fight that for some reason. And so like right away in the morning, I'm facing resistance. And then the other thing, I think just the overlying thing that I deal with in my life that causes a lot of resistance for me is just trying to control situations. And I don't think I necessarily am controlling when it comes to people, although maybe I am more than I think I am.
I haven't noticed that, no.
I don't think I'm controlling in that way, but I'm definitely very controlling over my own life and in trying to have things go a certain way, or like have my day planned out a certain way. And then if something comes up, like as simple as like a phone call, like all of a sudden I'll feel resistance to even like answering that phone call because it's going to get in the way of my day. And if I don't, but maybe that's like a phone call is going to change my life if I answer it, And so like I can kind of just trace back as I was thinking about this question before the episode as like, or this discussion topic, I just like, that sums up all of my resistance is caused by trying to control situations, really. So
interesting. Yeah. Control would be a big one. And I think, it probably would feature for me as well. Like, I think probably the best example I would have is writing my first academic publication. And, he talks about the different stages of resistance, getting started's a big one. Which was interesting because this publication that I wrote, getting started was quite easy. Like I was very enthusiastic about the subject matter. I just wrote. Well, actually, I suppose if I look at the starting point with it, in the past, getting started was very difficult for me. Like I would want to write the perfect sentence to get it started. So what I did this time was I'm just going to write. And even if I know that the words that are coming out of me are crap, it's all right. I'm gonna get started, and it helped me overcome that first hurdle of resistance. But then the resistance manifested in much more problematic ways later when we started to revise the drafts, and the probably the biggest one that nearly caused me to just bow out of the whole PhD thing, which right now sounds absurd, but it was when I had to completely overhaul and rewrite the paper because one of the other authors said, "Nah, this is just not working. It's not the way to frame this framework," And just the thought of starting again and was just like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, and that was just clearly resistance being like, nah, you're not good enough. And it was this fear of, what if I rewrite it again and then I have to do it again and again and again? Like, can I do this? I don't think I can. But pushing through that resistance was one of probably the biggest accomplishments of this year for me.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I was like, I don't know how, but I found the energy and the willpower to
Yeah.
push through what was incredibly difficult at the time. So, I feel like that's probably a bigger accomplishment for me than even submitting the article to the journal,
Right.
So,
yeah. But that reminded me just of what this quote that I had here, because he said, oh, what exactly did he say? Any act that derives from our higher nature instead of our lower will elicit resistance. And so that reminded me, because rewriting the paper was calling on you to derive from your higher nature and to force yourself to improve and grow and learn. And so then the resistance popped up because it didn't want you to.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that next, of kind of where the resistance comes from, possibly, and why it tries to sabotage you. But yeah, I know, as you said that too, I was thinking about that, because I do resist starting new things. Like, even, and it's so silly, because even if it's something that I've done before, and I know, like, I'll take my accounting work, for example, because that's a little, like, in my writing work and this work, it's like you're creating something. So you're never really doing something you've done before. But in my accounting work, I'm definitely doing things I've done before. And even then, sometimes I will feel resistance to it, because there's that weird fear of failure, I guess, or I don't know. It's just really weird, because it doesn't make sense. Like, there's absolutely no reason I should resist it. But I think it's just we'll get to talk about this in a minute, but it's kind of our default mode, unfortunately.
I think so, yeah. I think, the stakes are the highest, in those points, is like, I don't know, you've just got to push through that, I think. Yeah. And it's really hard sometimes, but it just adds so much more flavor, I guess, to the experience you've had. And, and you feel so proud of yourself when you can do it. It's not always easy. There'll be days, I'm sure, where, the stakes are pretty low. We still encounter resistance. And because the stakes are so low, it's like, meh, can't be bothered. Right, trying to push through this resistance. I just won't do it. So.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yep. All right. So I will move on to the next section here. And that is to discuss where resistance comes from. So in Pressfield's follow-up to The War of Art, which he called Turning Pro, he describes a conversation he had with a rabbi friend of his. And the point of the conversation was that Pressfield was wondering if there was a parallel to resistance in either Kabbalistic, Kabbalah, I always had to think of how to pronounce that. He was wondering if there was a parallel to resistance in Kabbalistic or Jewish mysticism. And so this is what the rabbi said to him. So I'm going to read this because it's a long quote. But the rabbi said, there is a second self inside you, an inner shadow self. This self doesn't care about you. It doesn't love you. It has its own agenda, and it will kill you. It will kill you like cancer. It will kill you to achieve its agenda, which is to prevent you from actualizing yourself, from becoming who you really are. The shadow self is called, in the Kabbalistic lexicon, the Yetzer Hara, I think. The Yetzer Hara, that's how I pronounce it. The Yetzer Hara, Steve, is what you would call resistance. So then I did a little research on what the Yetzer Hara is, and I got this from Wikipedia. So take it for what you will. But I mean, I don't know. I do go to Wikipedia, even though I know you can't necessarily trust it. But for most stuff, I think it's fine. It says that Yetzer Hara is a congenital inclination to do evil by violating the will of God. And it goes on to say that it's not a demonic force, but rather man's misuse of things the physical body needs to survive. So this was really interesting, because it gave some examples of where our need for food becomes gluttony due to the Yetzer Hara, because we're misusing the things that our body needs to survive, or misusing those. The need for procreation becomes promiscuity. The need for rest becomes sloth, etc. And we are all born with this good and evil inclination. And the Yetzer Hara blocks us from the wisdom and goodness that is within our soul. And it's something that we struggle with every day. And so knowing that we are born with this inclination towards self-sabotage, as we kind of just ended the last segment with, that leads us back to our question that I introduced at the beginning of, when we're struggling in life, how do we know if we need to rest, change course, or face resistance head on? Because, and I asked that question because it's a question I've been struggling with a lot. But but I guess I would actually, to back up maybe a minute and get your thoughts on the Yetzer Hara. I should probably ask you what you think about that.
It's interesting. I mean, it's got a lot of parallels with Carl Jung's The Shadow.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's very true. I was almost thinking as well, like the parallels with different religions and spiritual traditions. You know, it's almost that evil that's always permeating in the background and trying to get in the way of you achieving anything.
Right.
And maybe achieving almost that higher self or true self, you know, that we've talked about in past episodes.
Yeah.
So I guess it's knowing that that's always there. It's almost, in a way, it's like us conquering evil, I feel.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how I kind of, when I read that, that's how I kind of was thinking of it, is it's about, you know, every religion, I believe, or almost every religion has like a God and a devil, whatever their names are. And we've like externalized those things. Like there's something outside of us, but I don't think they are. I think the God and the devil are inside of us.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think that's what's happened is, it's probably easier for whatever religion's purpose to kind of create God as a human being, like a separate, well, not a human being, but, you know, a
but
separate
he is
figure.
Personified as a human being, like in pictures and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, just to make it easier for us to see those figures, you know, because it is so much more complex to say, well, God and the devil are within you, and you have to constantly navigate that. You know, I think that would make it maybe more tricky to understand for people. So they're like, we'll just create a figure who lives up in the clouds, you know, and someone who lives underground in hell, you know, that's easy to understand. Right. But yeah, I think that's the complexity of it, is for us to understand it's within each of us, this evil that we have to conquer every single day. And maybe that's what it is to, you know, I guess that ties in with that whole idea of sinning, you know, missing the mark is when you allow resistance to overcome you, and, you know, to almost achieve sainthood or to do well, you know, is to conquer that. That's where you kind of find that God within yourself, I guess.
Right. Or you're, appealing to your higher self, which I would say is akin to God, I guess.
Yeah.
If everybody lived that way, that would be heaven, I would say. I mean, it wouldn't really get any better than that if everybody was living that way. So
yeah, I think you're right. Yep.
But it's just odd because you just wonder, or I wonder, I don't know that anybody else does, but it's like this Yetzer, is it Yetzer? Now I'm forgetting.
Yetzer
Hara, your shadow self, resistance, like all these things are kind of synonymous, but you just wonder, they have to have a purpose. But it's like, is the only purpose so that there is some dichotomy between, because otherwise you wouldn't know what good was if you didn't know what bad was. And like, but it seems to me like, I know it serves that purpose, just that contrast, but it seems like it's got to serve some other purpose besides that, does it? I know. So you just wonder, or is it just a game? Like we've kind of talked about before too, where we're just like the pawns in this game, and whoever is like watching over this game is just testing us to see if we're going to survive the game or not.
Well, what I keep thinking about, you know, and this has been over many discussions we've had, many things I've read, is, you know, and Michael Singer talks about what we ultimately are, you know, in the untethered soul, about that we're just the witness. That's the constant, you know. We're not this construct of all these different ideas and thoughts and memories and all that, you know, that's not us. We are the one who's always witnessing that.
Yeah.
And I've always had this thought then, which is, that whole river of consciousness thing that I've talked about in past episodes, which is this idea that, when we leave this form, I believe we'll go back to that stream of consciousness and, where everyone else is and the ones that will come next. I think we're put into this form that we are now because it's so testing. It's where you're enhancing your experiences, because what could be more difficult than constantly battling like almost a shadow self and resistance, and doing that every single day. It's like that's surely whatever we are is being enhanced by that experience, it's whereas, we might, I don't know where we've come from, where we go to next, but like, I feel like, it's almost a testing ground. Like, how can we enhance the consciousness? All right, dump them in this really difficult world where there's so many things you have to struggle through every single day of your life,
Yeah, exactly. We're probably like powering some machine somewhere. We're like,
maybe
like
it's like the Matrix with the batteries.
Resistance, like the power level goes up.
That's, it's funny. That's what I feel like. I feel like there's this one really big, strong stream of consciousness. And for every person that, it sounds weird, but for every person, right, who has a big, long life full of multiple experiences and all those things, you go back into that river and it just strengthens that consciousness.
Right.
It is just like charging up a battery. So you want to be here and try and push through the resistance and the struggles as much as possible with the idea that you're just strengthening the consciousness at the end of it. True. Like a big battery.
That's a cool idea. No, I like that. I've never thought of it that way before. And that's really interesting. Well, and that would be really difficult for some people, I would think, because so this kind of helps me answer the question about whether you should rest, change your course, or if you should just face resistance head on when you're struggling with something. Because I think the wise person would know when to rest, but the reason that they're resting is because they want to be able to contribute to the collective consciousness. So they're not doing it necessarily for a selfish reason. They're doing it because they know that they have to take care of themselves in order to live a productive life. And in order to, add to that battery or whatever. Whereas the other person with the resistance, if they were giving into resistance and maybe falling more into sloth than rest, they would be doing it for selfish reasons, because they would just be doing it because they didn't feel like contributing to anything, or they didn't feel worthy enough to contribute to anything, and so they were doing it. So maybe that's the difference, is the reason that you're resting.
Yeah, I agree. I think we know when we're resting with purpose and when we're not.
Yeah,
and
right.
I say it's like reading I keep using PhD kind of scenarios, but that's all I've got to draw on these days.
Sure. Yeah, I know.
But it's reading a journal article. Like, there's times when I'm there and I'm reading it and it's just not going in. And I think, well, and then you've got two choices. I can push through and keep reading it and hope that it just clicks and I start to understand it and it's going in. Or I can go and take a break, let my brain kind of catch up, and then go back and read it again. Mm-hmm. And, there are times when I'm like, yep, I have to do that. I just know myself well enough to say, I'm going to waste time by trying to push against that resistance right now. The smart and wise thing to do is to go and have a break and to come back when I'm reset. And then, then I'll have a much better time of reading it. I'll absorb more of that article. So, I think, when you're going, can't be bothered. Like, I just, I'm just going to be lazy today and I want to go watch my shows, when I know I should be doing something productive. So I just think, we all know it. And so we should only be resting, I think, with purpose.
Yeah. And I think another way, this goes back to something that Pressfield said, another way to know is, he would say that you're giving into resistance if you feel hollow afterwards. And of course, I think the example that he gave had to do with sex, but he was talking about like because you can use sex as a form of resistance. Well, promiscuity is what we talked about with the Yetzer Hara. So that's a form of resistance. And he was saying you could tell the difference between if you're actually having sex for love or if you're having sex just because it's a form of resistance, because you'll feel hollow afterwards after you if you're using it as resistance.
Mm.
And I'm like, that actually makes a lot of sense, or I could picture that. But I mean, that could be anything too, like even like eating a cupcake. Like maybe you're on a diet and maybe you pick Saturday as your day that you cheat and eat whatever you want. Well, that day, if you eat a cupcake, you're not feeling hollow afterwards because you knew that was your reward for the week. Now, if you eat a cupcake on Tuesday, you're probably feeling hollow afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that's another way it's too late by then because it's already done, but it still gives you some information going forward to know.
Yeah, I think you're right. You do feel frustrated. It's like having a big night out, which I can say I did that yesterday. But
Yeah.
and you do wake up and you're frustrated because you've gone to excess. You didn't need to drink that much. Like I'm sure the experience would have been just as fun if without the copious amounts of booze. But
maybe
you do it anyways.
Yeah.
And maybe there's, I don't know, maybe the more you drink, the less you are able to push through that resistance. Because it is the hard road to say no when you've got, especially in the modern world we're in now, we've got access to everything constantly. So and maybe that's, again, it's like people are always saying, how hard times are now. Like, why isn't it simple like it used to be? Well, again, it's just enhancing, which is always funny because it was never easy.
It's never been simple. I mean,
it's never been simple. It's just like a different time. But the modern age, what a great opportunity to face more resistance than we ever have in our lives.
Yeah.
And just, make that battery even stronger at the end of our lives or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. It's an opportunity. I like that.
Yeah.
Opportunity to charge up that battery.
Yeah.
Did you want to introduce a couple Steven Pressfield?
Yes, I'll go through some quotes. I really love this one. It was, we cannot control the level of talent we've been given. We have no control over the nature of our gift. What we can control is our self-motivation, self-discipline, self-validation, and our self-reinforcement. And what I really like about Pressfield, and I was talking to Amanda about this before the show, but when he was a kid, he said, I wasn't like some kind of English genius or something. He said, I did okay at English. Like I didn't grow up thinking I'm going to be a successful author. He said it just, he found that along the way. And he said, I'm not particularly talented, but I do, really do my best every day to push against that resistance. And he's a successful author who's written many books that have been, bestsellers. But he said, still he faces resistance every single day. And the difference, I think, of what's made him so successful is that, maybe there are people out there with more talent than him, but they can't overcome that adversity, that resistance. So it's quite nice to hear because, I'm sure we all sit there sometimes going, I wish I was successful as, I don't know, Bill Gates or as talented as Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, whatever. But it's nice to think, and there's an equality in that we can all overcome resistance and, be self-disciplined and self-validating. That's nice to hear because, there's some things that we're not going to be talented at, and that's just our lot in life. So,
Right. I think
what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's the other key part of that quote, I think, though, is not only do you have to beat resistance, but you have to accept the talent you've been given and go with those, because I think so often, I'm sure I have done it, and I'm sure most people have at some point, you resist your natural talent and you chase something else, maybe because it seems like sexier, or it makes more money, or it's just easier to do, or whatever. So I guess that is the resistance, is that you are resisting your natural calling. But that was the other key part of that quote to me, is that only facing resistance only works if you are doing that in conjunction with following or using your natural talents, like figuring out what your natural talents are and then going with it, whether that's what you want to do or not, or whether that's what you had in mind that your life was going to be or not.
Yeah, I think that's true. We do chase the sexier thing, which it's funny, isn't it? Like if you really sat there and cultivated your talents and put them into whatever you want to do, you'd be a lot more successful than if you tried to cultivate areas that are not strengths at all. I think you need to spend that time thinking about your abilities. Like, I'd look at it, for example, I would say I'm not particularly good at writing. I've never been good at writing. I enjoy writing sometimes, but I'm not great at it. I'm probably better, speaking, I think. Like, it's funny. I can probably get a point across a lot more eloquently, whether it's in a speech or whether it's, in a podcast or an interview or something, because I don't know, that's something I'm good at. But so, what's the point of me continuing to try and hone this craft of writing when it's not my talent? Like maybe I just need to find a platform to speak. Maybe it's easier,
which you are working on that too.
And I'd say you'd be the same with writing. Like you're a very talented writer, but is that a talent, or is that something you've honed over the years to get? Yeah.
Well, it's both, but I feel like a lot of it is just natural. Like when I sit down to do it, and when I can actually beat the resistance and just sit down and just let it flow. Like he talks about the muse. Like if I actually let the muse talk to me and do her thing, it just comes out naturally, I believe. Because I've had no formal training in writing. I had to write a lot. I used to do auditing work, and so you had to write a lot of explanation about what you audited, why what you did was good enough. There's a lot of writing involved, like persuasive writing in that way, but that's completely different. But I mean, I think that helped in a way, like it helps for the kind of writing I do now. But I mean, I was never trained to be a writer. And so I do believe, and I used to write poetry and stuff when I was a kid. And so I think some of that is just naturally in me, but it is also what I resist the most. But I think it goes back to another thing that Pressfield said is, when you're really coming up against resistance hard, it's because you really care about that thing, or it's very important to you, because that's when resistance is going to hit the hardest. And so I think that's probably why I do resist writing so much, is because it is very important to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. So that could be a test. If you feel resistance, keep in mind that it must be important. So it's probably a good idea to try and push through that, because it does mean something to you. Yeah. I've got another quote as well. Oh, sorry. Did you have something else to add?
No. I was just saying you had another quote.
Oh, sorry. Yep. So this one is: resistance is like the villain in a movie. If there were no villain, there would be no movie. Resistance gives meaning to everything. And yeah, I think it's so true. We've kind of touched on it already in this chat, but yeah, it does add a lot more value, and that example about the, me writing the paper and overcoming that difficulty, by pushing through that resistance, that villain, I guess, I was able to, cultivate my critical thinking skills.
Right.
I was able to create a better product. And yes, you could have just taken the easy road and said, no, it's too hard. But, I think sometimes as well, you just don't have it in you, or at least I found that I was like, no matter how much I feel like giving this thing up, I don't think I really can, because I know what will come out the other side. I will give this up knowing that it's the thing that I'm meant to do. And then I'll just be so frustrated at myself for giving up when it's hard. I'm like, this is what gives meaning to it. It's these moments, learning critical thinking is the most important part, I think, of a PhD. It's not the academic publications. They're just an output. It's the experience of learning critical thinking. So when you're in a business setting down the track, you can think differently to how others think.
Exactly.
So I wouldn't have come across that if not for the resistance, So it's a good example of the villain, I suppose adding value to my movie, I suppose.
No, it's perfect. But it made me think of the Adolf Hitler example from earlier, where depending on how I split this up, you might not have heard this yet, but that Pressfield said that it was easier for Adolf Hitler to start World War II than to paint, because I guess he was the painter. Well, I'm like, yeah, stick with the PhD, Adam, or else you'll be over there starting World War III.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's
but I think it does have the power to break people that way, because like you said, you knew what would come out the other end is like huge regret. And that could really break somebody.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take much to break a person, unfortunately. So
yeah, and I think there's tests as well along the way. I think of as to how much you're willing to put into something. And I've had opportunities along the way to take an easier path.
Yeah.
But I remember when I was presented with that, I was like, no, I'm taking the hard path, because that's I know what the easy path is. I've been down it before, and it's not great. So, why don't I try this other path, that's more difficult. But I mean, I guess that's the whole thing with this show, that people will continue to walk down that easy path again and again and again, because they can't face the resistance. And they're like, okay, well, you can do that, but just as, Pressfield says, you're probably not going to be very successful.
Right. Well, or even just happy.
Yeah.
Because he says what did he say? Oh, I lost it. Oh, there it is. Most toxic force on the planet, the root of more unhappiness than poverty, disease, and erectile dysfunction. So, I mean, there it is. It's like, yeah, if you want to give into it, that's what you can expect is unhappiness. So, but it's like just something you have to face every day. And hopefully it gets easier.
Could you use it, give us any examples of where that villain has added meaning to your movie this year?
Sure, let me think here. So
on the spot there, sorry.
No, that's fine. I'm just thinking. So the resistance, like I said, the biggest thing I've been resisting is writing. And also I'm putting together a course, an introduction to intentional living, and I've been facing a lot of resistance with that. But I think when I get done with this, so I'll focus on the course. This course has become way more than I expected it to be. But I think when I'm done with it, I will have put together a huge project with a lot of different pieces. And I've never done anything like that before. So I'm learning, there's so many little different pieces to it that I'm learning so many different things along the way. So I think I haven't seen it to fruition yet, so I don't know, but I got to imagine that when I get through this, whatever I decide to tackle next is just going to be that much better or that much easier to tackle. So I haven't gotten to it yet. Like you already faced yours and already got to the other side, but.
Well, he gave some advice too, and he just talked about whatever your project is, if you're struggling with it, he's like, write it all down on one single page. Like have it there, beginning to end, this is what it is. And obviously there'll be the steps along the way that you need to fill in.
Yeah.
But he's like, once you put that project on a single piece of paper, it's less scary, right? Like you've mapped out the core resistance, which is, well, I know that this is the thing. This is the project. Now it's just about filling in, and I suppose, and the project itself, like it almost in a way says to you, I've already done this. It's done. It's just how I do it along the way, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because I suppose with your course, like, having done the first week of it, I really enjoyed it. And it's like, but I could see, because of the complexity of it, how it could be so easy for it to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, so that could always be a useful tip, which he apparently does for all of his, his writing, is just to put it on one big page and kind of know what the end will be, so it doesn't continue to just get away from you.
Exactly. Well, it's funny because I kind of did that and I didn't even realize that, but yeah, that's funny because I did. So hey, I'm channeling Steven Pressfield and I didn't even know it.
Well done.
Nice. So now I know that. So now I can go back to that piece of paper and know, okay, that's going to help me will help me get through resistance. So I like that. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to do.
Thanks for that, Pressfield. He's a smart man.
Did you have any other quotes or just?
No, that's the end of the quotes. I'm thinking if there was anything else.
Are we good to wrap up, or you got any?
I think we're good to wrap up. Yes.
Awesome. So that was fun. We had to talk about a lot of different things and introduce people to Steven Pressfield, maybe. So
yeah, and we overcame the resistance. Like Amanda and I have had a busy end to the year. A lot of personal things that have popped up, that have made it hard. And I think in a way, we probably have, to a certain degree, come up against a bit of resistance with the podcast, being like, what are we doing? And that was the hardest thing, I thought, is coming back to record after a big break.
Yeah.
Is it's like, it's hard to record. But I was like, once we push through this, then we'll get ourselves back on track for the new year.
Good. So, all right. So I will wrap things up and I'll say, if you made it this far, thank you so much for sticking around. We really appreciate it. We'd really appreciate your support by just following us, commenting, leave a comment, subscribing on YouTube. You can follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music. You can email us at cheerstonotsettling@gmail.com. You can be so generous as to give us as little as $1 to help us keep this thing going over at Coffee. There'll be a link in the description to do that. And so I think that's everything pretty much. So we'll just say until next time, cheers to not settling.
Cheers to not settling. Bye.
Bye.